as far as the feminist movement is concerned, I am a male chauvinist, proudly.
Welcome to the Ayn Rand Fan Club. I'm Scott Schiff along with William Swig. William, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. Well, we are very pleased to have Sunny Lohmann with us. And
Hello.
hi there, welcome. She's a longtime Ayn Rand fan herself. She has a long history in the movement. We could get into that, but we do want to find out a little bit about you and your background. And you did a podcast for a while, and it was like I could see you almost changing your attitude about orthodox objectivism as it was going along. So tell us just a little about yourself.
Well, I don't know what to say. What do you want to know specifically? I had a podcast for 5 years. I closed it about a year ago, for various reasons, and I'm getting itchy about it. Like I really want to start another one. I really miss it. I miss the weekly talking about the news and talking about intellectual stuff with people I
Absolutely.
like.
Well, we're very glad you're here. Per that opening clip, we're actually going to be talking about Rand's view on voting for a woman president, and thought it would be good to have you, a female voice as well. But also, we've been wanting to
Yeah,
get
a
you on the show for a while.
representative.
Hey,
I'm representing.
before we get going here, Sunny, why don't you tell us about the first time you heard about Rand and what you thought of her?
Yeah. So I read Atlas Shrugged when I was 17, a long time ago, and my dad gave it to me to read. He was a fan of Ayn Rand's, and he had a lot of her stuff. And I just kind of started after that, just kind of blew my mind. I think a lot of people experienced that. And I was an intellectual kid. I was looking for a philosophy, and I wasn't too interested in religion. It just didn't seem to offer what I was looking for, which was basically certainty.
Right.
And um so that was great. And then I was really lucky because in the 90s there were some great student clubs, and I was part of the University of Minnesota Objectivist Club. And that was a really fantastic club, full of normal people, smart people, regular people who were good at other things and weren't just, ridiculous rationalists. And I didn't sort of realize that there was this sect of objectivism that was like that. And we were affiliated with the Ayn Rand Institute, and we got they were great. They provided us with lecture tapes and
Hmm.
materials and speakers, and we had 2 speaking events a year, and we gave out a million gazillion man's rights pamphlets, and um I'm sure we made a difference on campus, and that was really fun. It was a great experience. So, and I do like a lot of people who have worked at the Ayn Rand Institute and are part of that group, that clique, I guess. um so I don't, I'm not like anti all those individuals.
Sure.
But yeah, what I've seen since basically, I personally attribute it to the retirement of Leonard Peikoff. Because I think I didn't realize how much he kept the movement intellectually on the rails. He's a clever guy, especially in applying politics. I think he did a good job, and I agreed with him a lot. But I just thought, oh yeah, that's objectivism. That's objectivism and objectivists. He retires, stops doing his podcast, and all of a sudden I'm like, what? Do people really think that? Like all of a sudden everything just started unraveling. And then Trump. And I mean, the TDS, the
Sure.
crazy TDS to make objectivists just literally, and I'm talking about the intellectual echelon, um, lose their principles. I heard ARI objectivists say stuff like, well, yeah, the Paris Climate Accords might be, like if you separate everything out, it's a good thing, but he didn't get out of it for any good reason. And so it's bad. It's like a bad action. So like
They decide they don't like
psychologizing.
someone, and then they're going to examine everything through that prism.
Well, what does that have to do with anything? Like, is it good for America to be in or out of the Paris Climate Accords? And so that's what you're looking at with politics, but they have to psychologize the politician. They were just pure social metaphysicians about their opinion on value. And I'm like, is this an I couldn't believe it. And then this advocacy for voting for like literal communists or dementia patients instead of like just a guy from Queens who's a businessman and like literally should be probably the most ideal objectivist candidate we've ever had. He's the most objective-ish of any political candidate for presidency that we've ever had.
Yeah, I see it that way. It feeds into some of the timeliness of this article, because people on both sides tend, and I'll admit I've done it, try to talk for Ayn Rand and what, she would have supported our candidate. And, ARI said things alluding to that Rand would never have supported Trump. But I mean, say what, that's all conjecture. We know one thing for sure, that Ayn Rand would not be voting for Kamala Harris because she said she wouldn't be voting for a woman president.
Well,
she did make one stipulation when asked if there were no qualified men, would she vote for a woman? She said she might do that. But I think we have plenty of qualified men these days, and so I agree. She would not be voting for Kamala Harris in this election.
Well, least of all because she's a communist.
That's exactly.
I mean, my God, she's a communist.
There's a difference between Margaret Thatcher and someone that is advocating taking our speech rights away in the name of misinformation.
Yeah, I don't think she would have voted for Biden. She just wouldn't have voted for any Democrat probably for the last several elections now. It's just, to me, it's just unthinkable that Ayn Rand would have been voting for a Democrat.
Right.
Absolutely, 100%.
To just kind of go into, to segue from that into the article, Rand did address the issue on the Phil Donahue show.
Do you believe that there is going to be a day where there's going to be a female in the White House as president? And how do you feel about that?
I wouldn't vote for her.
You would or wouldn't?
Would not.
Would not?
No.
Why not?
For many reasons. I've written an article about that in my former magazine. You'll have to find out my reasons there.
Yes.
The magazine is The Objectivist.
Would you not vote for her because she was a woman, even if she were better qualified than any man?
If we had followed that law, I might.
That low? I think you have a very, very low opinion of women.
Let me answer this. It is not to a woman's personal interest to rule men. It puts her in a very unhappy position. I don't believe that any good woman would want that position.
So you are essentially against leadership positions for women then?
No. Oh, no. A president is not the only leadership position. There's senators and congressmen and
it's all right for you if they run and be elected?
Oh, certainly, and I vote for them. But wait a moment. A commander-in-chief of the army, a woman, I think it's unspeakable.
We are in New York City with Ayn Rand, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Do you ever, in reading this article today, I haven't read this article since I was a kid, like in maybe 20 or something.
Right.
And I was reading it and I was thinking, you know what? She's like Trump. She says this crap. Like, she is a marketing person. She's making a scene. She's selling books. She's selling ideas. She's literally riling people up to pay attention.
Yeah, I got the sense she likes sending the crowd into a tizzy like
Yeah, did you see that little sparkle in her eye at the end there?
that.
I think she felt the pressure of the commercial break coming up. And at the end, she made probably the best point she ever made about this issue. Is she says, Commander in Chief of the Army, a woman, it's unspeakable. And I think that's pointing to some like visceral feeling or idea she had about this position of the presidency. She's thinking, how could a woman command the army, which is primarily men, almost entirely fighting men? So I think that's the real issue, and that needs to be solved. And the rest of the stuff in her article is rationalization, to put it bluntly. I don't think it's a good argument. I think there's a lot of question begging going on in her article. But when she touches on the issue of a commander in chief being a female, that gets to the issues of the sexes. What is a woman? What is a man? And I think what defines a woman in nature is that she's the one who gives birth. She's the life giver. She's the nurturer. And what defines a man is he's the protector of his wife and his child, the family. He has to do the fighting or the defending. And so at that level of a man, female versus male, it's hard to accept a woman as a commander of a military, which is engaged for war. So it has to be a very special woman, I think, to fulfill that position. And that's the only real aspect of the president's duties, I think, that a female might not be fit for.
What do you think about that, Sunny?
Um, I think that really does that definitely touches on one aspect of it. I do think there are others, but yeah, I mean, it was funny because I was rereading this essay, and in it, she says the essence of a woman is hero worship. And now, as a mother, I was like, no, it's not. The essence of a woman is motherhood. Um, I think
Fascinating.
that an aspect of her is hero worship, but it's not her. I don't think the essence is. And so I think you're right. I'm I'm looking through history though, and I do see that I think there were women who are, it's not a capability issue. And I think Rand makes that clear too. It's not that she's saying a woman doesn't have the intelligence or even the psychology needed, because you could have a psychology where you're not the average woman, but you're capable of, I mean, just look at like somebody like Queen Elizabeth the First. Um, she did a great job as the ruler of England for that period of time. There were wars and battles that England won during her reign. There were, they didn't get invaded, they didn't lose land. I mean, she did a good job. But look at her personal life. And, a king has wives and children, but she didn't get that. She did not get to have a husband and kids. So it was a sacrifice. And could she then be happy? I don't know. Probably not.
I mean, I
Rand,
go a bit to the example of Margaret Thatcher. I mean, she invaded the Falkland Islands.
Yeah,
And
and she had children. She had a husband. I don't.
right.
Yeah, yeah. So, and she was great.
and
Yeah,
I don't mean
and
to disqualify all women with this argument. I just see it as a more fundamental argument in favor of Rand's position. I think Rand took it to the psychological level, and she based it in her theory of femininity, which I think has flaws, as Sunny was pointing out. So I think that she took an unfinished theory and tried to apply it to this political issue of a woman being president. I don't think it works. I think there's problems with it, and you can see that in the argument, the poor arguments she makes. and how she struggles to even connect the issue of the commander in chief. She just sort of says it's unspeakable. Well, that's not an argument. She doesn't come up with an actual logical argument for why a woman couldn't be a commander in chief of the army.
Right. And going to the article, she uses that language. A woman cannot reasonably want to be commander in chief. So, reasonably want what
I think she's saying it would be bad for a woman. It would be bad for a woman. And so therefore it's irrational. And so therefore a woman who would want it would be not worth the position. I mean, it makes sense on some level.
It just,
in like the case of Queen Elizabeth, she didn't choose it. She became it because of birth. We have the situation where you have to run and actually want the job. So it is a little bit different, but
I just, that could bleed into all sorts of things. Like, she claims she was okay with a woman senator or congresswoman, but, I mean, should women be in the military? I mean, should they be able to be generals? Should they be able to have command?
I don't think so in general. I don't think so. I think of the military as violence, and the people who are best at that are going to be men. And you would have to be such an exception to the rule. You would have to be extraordinary, like a Joan of Arc. I mean, it's not going to be most women.
I think in the more physical positions within the army, like if you're on the front line having to duke it out with the enemy, that might not be the best position for a female unless she's like some super badass fighter. But there are positions in the army that I think females can perform, or duties they can perform. There's a lot of, like, a mechanic. Some women are very mechanical, can fix the vehicles, they can be nurses, things like that. So there are positions that are needed that could be fulfilled by women.
Logistics. I think women are good at logistics.
Sure. Planning, any strategizing.
Yeah. And that makes sense. What the left does is they go in and they say, we need parity at each of these positions, where it's at least half women or all women.
That's the thing. I feel like it's it's like you just open the floodgate or nothing.
Yeah, I do think it relates to the implicit way that others in the collective were encouraged to share her same favorites in art, like Rachmaninoff or Mickey Spillane, or even like smoking. That no woman should feel differently about it than her.
I think it also gets to would Americans want a female president? Do you want I also, just thinking about somebody like Kamala. I mean, Kamala Harris obviously is not a good choice, but you have countries where the leaders do not respect women. And, I'm not saying that we should appease that, but what does happen then in a meeting room between, an Islamic leader and a female president? Is she going to be able to negotiate the best deal for America in that situation? Is she going to be able to? She's already at a disadvantage. And so, I mean, that's just the fact of life. I don't know how you get around that kind of thing either.
What about the argument that, go ahead, Wayne.
In terms of her just political stance, she's more of a socialist. And so to me, that just disqualifies her as a leader of America, which is individualistic. But also, getting back to my point about her just being a female, I don't think she doesn't have any kids, right? So it's right. Donald Trump has kids. He's had the experience of leading a family and protecting his family. And that can translate to protecting a nation and being the commander in chief of the army. But Kamala has none of that. Like, if she had children, she had a family, and
I think she has some stepchildren,
having to protect them and all that, that would make some difference, But I don't even think at the female level she's qualified to be a commander in chief of the army.
Well, it's not that. It's just what are the goals? Is she willing to fight for America's interest, or does she want, them to be focused more on the military to be focused on transgender rights or green goals? I mean, that's disqualifying, for any person, whether they're male or female.
Sure, I mean,
I
for
want to
one,
ask,
it's qualifier.
yeah. I want to ask, what about the idea that as technology changes, that we're not having as many soldiers in the fields, that future wars could be fought with drones, that if that makes it less contextual than when Ayn Rand talked about it?
Well,
Are you asking me?
there's
Either.
Go
still
ahead.
the issue of male aggressiveness and you know desire to fight. So even if it gets to just drones fighting each other, you'd still have to have a commander who's willing to attack another nation or defend their own nation. It's still fighting, it's still war.
Sunny?
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think it makes a difference.
There's another piece in the essay where she says, I was counting on readers of my novels to understand my reasons. So even she's admitting it's not self-evident.
Right. I mean, that's a good
Yeah.
point. She's kind of relying on her readers to understand something that isn't in the novels. Like if you read Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead, you're not going to learn from that experience like why you shouldn't vote for a woman president. It's like it's kind of a weird thing for her to say, you know.
I think it's a hint of guilt to those who don't understand the connection she's made. It's like to those who to those who understand, no explanation is necessary.
A lot of people say right now that we're living in a feminized society, and that's part of the reason why it's so awful. That's out of balance in that way, on the female side. And I can relate to that. I think it does make sense. Our empathy is empathy is the greatest virtue and is being weaponized. And
Right.
it's a very female trait or emotion. And I I I wonder too, if we did have a female president, like let's say that she's very capable, like a Margaret Thatcher type, would the men of the nation feel emasculated? Would it emasculate the nation? Would the military feel emasculated? I mean, there is it's not just about her, but what happens psychologically to the men of the country if you're living in a matriarchy?
Yeah, Rand brings that up about being against a matriarchy, but I guess I go back to Thatcher a little bit. I don't know that that necessarily happened to the men of that lived under her. Maybe it did.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I mean, here we are.
I mean, I'm looking at
That
Britain. I
might
don't see
be,
a lot of masculine men over there. I see
that might be
a lot of emasculated, or I see a lot of Western suicide.
William?
well, a matriarchy is one thing, a presidency is another. So we wouldn't have, and this is one criticism I actually agree with that I think came from Harry, maybe Harry Binswanger. And they were saying that Rand, turned the presidency into this sort of matriarchy thing when it's not that. And this is going to be one of my points is that Rand fundamentally mischaracterized the presidency. And the president is not all powerful. He isn't even the highest authority in the government. The government shares power among three different branches. So the president is checked. His powers are checked by the Senate, and by the judiciary. So it's not the case that president would be like this top dog and he would not have any equals. And so, that would destroy a woman's femininity and hero worship because she would just be dealing with inferiors. That's not really the case. The president has to deal with Congress, has to deal with the Supreme Court. He can be impeached by the Senate. So it's not the case that he's this like patriarch. And so it would be the same thing if we had a female president. It wouldn't be a matriarchy. The female president would have to deal with equals and would have checks on her power.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I don't see the president as the most important person in the country. I mean, just look at somebody like Elon Musk is a very powerful person. Jeff Bezos, like some of these titans of industry are also powerful men. Bill Gates, Bill Gates didn't care that Trump was in office. He did all kinds of things to subvert Trump. So yeah, I agree with that. I think in this country it's different. But
at least within the executive branch, everyone else is going to be inferior to him.
But not even that. Not today.
The collective of the administrative state may have more power, but the president does still have power as an individual. And even, and more than any individual senator or congressman. It seems like that Rand is saying that she wants, that women shouldn't be in a superior position without totally saying it.
I think she was kind of floundering with this argument, and it shows in the way she makes certain points that aren't really connected, and there's no real grounding in reality here. So, obviously the president is very powerful and very influential, but it's not like he can just wave a wand and make everything happen. He's not a dictator. He's not a king. And he doesn't rule a patriarchy. This is America.
It's also a short period of time. It's really just 4 to 8 years.
Yeah, his power is limited, even in that capacity. So,
yeah,
so I would say if you're going to make an argument for the highest authority, it's the Constitution. We try to go by what's written down in the Constitution and the laws. We have a constitutional republic, and the president vows to, obey it and enforce it. So even he, when he's elected president, he promises to operate under the Constitution. So basically we have a written highest authority, and we try to follow that, even though it doesn't work all the time.
Well, in this next clip, she tries to explain further. This is someone reading the essay, Juliette Sherrill, and here's that clip.
I do not think that a rational woman can want to be president. Observe that I did not say that she would be unable to do the job. I said that she could not want it. It is not a matter of her ability, but of her values.
What I find interesting here is that she makes this issue a litmus test on a woman's rationality. So even if you just are seeking the presidency, that kind of means you're irrational.
Right, and disqualifies you.
Yeah, this is what I mean by begging the question. I think she's just assuming her conclusion is true at the beginning or all throughout her arguments. She's not really making an argument from the ground up to prove her conclusion.
But could you make that argument? Forget her essay. What do we think? And I think you can make that argument. Maybe not. The way I'm sitting on this issue is that in general, I think that it's unfavorable to have a female president, but there would be exceptions. I could see exceptions to that. But that's it. I mean, I would never, but in general, I think most women are not cut out for that job. And most women would not be able to happily do the job, successfully do the job. Not that they couldn't
Well,
handle a lot of the aspects of the job, but I think some of the critical aspects of that job, they are just not as well suited for in general because of biology, you know? Not that
just
there wouldn't be exceptions.
ballpark. Are you saying 5-10% of women might be able to do it, or
I don't even think that. And I mean, just look at how many Margaret Thatchers have there been in history. You know, it's just,
right?
it's a rare personality. And also you'd have to put that up against what your choices are. Would Margaret Thatcher have been the great persona that she became if there had been a strong group of a dozen men who could be, who were as good as her? If there were more men capable and with that ideology, like right now, there's a female British MP that is a rising star. She's sort of like a Thatcher reincarnated. She's extremely witty, verbally very, very high, skills, and very conservative, naturally, actually deeply conservative. And so
Is
you've
this
got
Kimmy?
another, yeah, it's Kemi, and she's rising, she's a rising star. And there really aren't, where are the other men in Britain that are capable of doing that? Besides maybe Nigel Farage, there really is no other man who's capable of sort of humorously talking circles around Democrats or Labor Party people and communists. So it's part of it is the lack of male leadership
That's
that
what Rand was saying in
causes.
Donahue, that, if a woman would be qualified, it means we've fallen that far.
And that's a good point. I mean, where are the masculine, intelligent, men who have a spine and a backbone and aren't just, you know, fake?
Well, I'll
So
just
I think that's an important point. It's like all of this plays a role, the circumstances of the nation, all of that depends on whether or not you end up with a woman. And especially like in the UK right now, the fact that Kemi is Black and an immigrant, part of an immigrant family makes her capable of getting away with stuff that a white male in Europe just would not get away. And I don't mean get away with, but people don't automatically dismiss her because she's not a white male. So because of the cultural, diversity,
Right.
the elevation of diversity, female, Black, she's in a position to stand out and to actually make a difference, whereas somebody else would just never even be elected, you know?
Yeah, it almost, takes something like being black or female
It
to
really does.
be able to even stand up for some of those principles without being called a bigot. I mean, the left says capitalism is racist some days.
there's a
Yeah, and
lot
I
of
mean it's successfully integrated into our cultures, and so we are in the situation where we might need to have a female to fix things, although we have Donald Trump, so we don't need that right now, but he's old. I mean, what happens next? We've got some great men, I think, on the
Yeah.
right now.
I'd vote for
It's pretty
Tulsi Gabbard
exciting.
before Jeb Bush.
Oh, 100%. I mean that like Tulsi's great, but again, if it was Tulsi versus JD Vance, I'd pick JD Vance.
Right. Yeah.
well, there's a lot of factors going on here. You ask where are all the masculine men. I think due to our cultural deterioration ever since the injection of the socialist policies and the welfare state. I mean, masculine men have had to go to work in the, labor industries where it takes a lot of physical effort to produce things. So you're going to see a lot of capable men like Elon Musk running companies that are producing things that we need, like cars. So they don't really have the time to fiddle around with the presidency. They're trying to keep the country going. And that's kind of one of the themes of Atlas Shrugged, is that even John Galt, like when he went on strike, he just started doing manual labor, just to keep, in contact with Dagny. But masculine men pursue masculine values, which tend to be work, production, fighting wars, things like that. So when you're at this level of cultural degradation and deterioration, the men are going to be pretty much dying to keep the culture alive.
Well, it just, I just see it a little bit as automation. At least the perception is that, men have less value. You don't need those survival things. I mean, we just went through a hurricane here, so you realize you need to be able to do things and move things when it counts. But that is at least that idea is out there, that because of technology that we don't need male leaders. There's been a move towards this like matriarchy, and it's part of feminism that Rand was talking about in the opening clip.
Sure, it's also that, and like I said, there's a lot of factors going on here. There's this idea of feminism, and women can do everything men can do. Heck, men can't do everything women can do. You just need to be reasonable and objective about these things, or else you go into la la land and you start believing these weird things, and you end up with some sort of matriarchy or matriarchal system or feminism. And it can go the other way too. You can have a masculinism, and it can go awry. But if people just stick to objective reality and realize what works, what is true, then you're going to have a balanced society where women and men get along and have happy families and create a thriving culture. But when you inject false ideas into the system and then teach them in schools, and people start believing these things based on faith, and just become irrational, then all hell's going to break loose. And there's so many problematic things going on, and factors that drive the culture into the ground and just ruin everything. So I think we're just in a state where it's been going on for a long time. It's taken decades for us to get to this situation where we're looking at a possible Kamala presidency, and it's just ridiculous. And like
it's insane that she's the candidate on so many levels. It's not even that because she's a woman, but like how she got her start in politics is super creepy. Her statements, her authoritarian statements should disqualify her. There's just so much.
They were trying to drag Biden across the finish line.
If you got your start in politics basically sleeping with the mayor who was married at the time, that's how you got your first job. I mean, that should disqualify her.
She has no qualifications. It's just, and that I think the Democrats are actively trying to destroy America. And this is one way that they're doing it, by trying to get us to vote for this person who's completely unqualified for the presidency.
I see it more as just an empty suit, someone like, Biden that's not all there, or, she doesn't have a lot of original ideas, obviously. And so the technocrats stay in charge, and it's almost becoming, the presidency is almost becoming a bit of a figurehead if the Democrats keep power.
Well, of course, Biden was a puppet, and so Kamala is going to be an even greater puppet. I mean, she'll just do whatever the deep state wants her to do. She's just a figurehead. That's all she is.
Yeah. Well, I want to go to this.
But mean tweets, you guys.
Yeah, exactly. Mean tweets are what we have to.
But mean tweets.
And it's not even so much that, it's the fact that there are people that claim to be adherents of Ayn Rand, that the mean tweets were just too much for them, and they just.
I know. Rand isn't the most controversial, like, mean tweeter ever.
Exactly. She was
Yeah.
a pariah to the establishment. She wasn't trying to get accepted.
She wasn't nice.
Yeah, who values
She
niceness?
wasn't civil.
I
Remember
mean,
when she has in the Fountainhead works like, I'm not kind.
that's true. And on the Donahue interview, there was another woman who asked her a snide question, and she basically said she wouldn't answer this woman because of the tone. And she's like, "But anyone else can ask me the same question." So, she did care about
Yep.
tone somewhat. Um, she discusses how the issue is primarily psychological and how, a woman has the desire to look up to a man. To me, I just, she's trying to rationalize it because it seems more a vestige of the values of the world she grew up in, but she can't say that as a champion of reason. I don't think it's fair to judge historical figures by today's standards. But even on Donahue, she was somewhat challenged to explain herself.
Well, she does say that the issue is primarily psychological. And so I disagree with that. I don't think it's primarily psychological. And I don't think it's fair to try to apply an objectivist view of psychology to every woman in the world, which she seems to be trying to do. She's kind of projecting her idea of femininity onto everybody, saying if some woman doesn't have this type of femininity, then she's irrational and unfit for the presidency. I think that's just a fundamentally bad argument. I don't think you should base, your argument against a female president on psychology, because when it comes down to it, you're only you're only directly aware of your own psychology. So you have to kind of you'd have to assume things about other people's psychology. And that's a very dangerous thing to start doing, speculating on what Kamala's psychology is. I
But
mean,
can you assume, yeah, I mean, I don't want to, but can you assume that women in general, you can assume a general, I don't know if it's psychology, but given their biology and the identity of a female, like in reality,
yeah.
you can assume certain things are going to make her miserable versus not. And if you have to stuff aspects of yourself that are essential to you. So if you have a job where you have to be very masculine because otherwise it creates too much friction that you have to deal with, makes your job so much harder. So you masculinize your behavior. It's kind of soul crushing. And I mean, maybe there are women out there who can do that without it crushing their soul. Or maybe there are women out there who just are on the spectrum of, are just more masculine females, which there certainly are. I mean, we see that in reality in our lives. So I think there is something to that, but I don't think it's universal. I think there are women that
Right.
like what you were saying. I think when she says, well, they're just automatically irrational, again, I think you have to judge the individual, because I could see a situation where a woman would enjoy that masculine game, the of stuffing, it doesn't really have those more female qualities. I just, again, like I have my own experience in like business which is my primary experience out in the world, playing a men's game or working for women who have masculinized their personalities. They
Uh-huh.
tend to be worse than men. They're the most unpleasant people to work for. Um, they're not just not feminine, they're jerks. They're like the worst kind of guy. They have no emotion. They have almost no empathy. They don't work with you. They're not fun to work for. Whereas like a guy who's a ball buster, who takes no prisoners, is still jovial, is still like there's still a certain rapport that you can have with somebody like that. And I found that women were very difficult to work for who were at the top of businesses because they were so masculinized and it was kind of fake, and they seemed miserable, and they were very guarded people. So
I think it would have to come from some natural tendencies, like
yeah,
they're tomboys who have a masculine edge to them.
But
And
it should be natural. We shouldn't be
right.
pushing these girls into STEM any more than they want to of their own accord.
Yeah, so I could see like if some girl grew up as a tomboy, playing with the boys, rough and tumble, and getting into fights and stuff, she might have the psychology to become a president, a commander in chief specifically, because she's into that. She's into working with the boys. But if
Right.
you're more feminine, you're I don't know what they call a hyper feminine girl, but if you're just like a beauty queen or something, and you just want a husband, you want a family, you want children, that's all fine. But you're probably not you're not going to be a good leader of the army.
Well, let's go back to Margaret Thatcher, who I think was feminine, but also in a man's world, able to achieve in a man's world. And I think you don't get the sense that she was hiding her femininity. There was, you know what I'm saying? So she was that rare woman who could be feminine, who was on the, probably very masculine for a woman, but could be feminine, could be female, have a lot of female traits, and not, and deal with the fact that that was going to create a lot of friction around her, and that she didn't care. She could deal with that. You know what I'm saying?
There was a scene in The Crown with her that I found jarring when she's basically cooking dinner for her cabinet while they're working late, you know, working on a crisis. And it's just like, wow, they couldn't bring someone in, I guess.
I wonder if that really happened.
It might also, another factor here is what sort of society are you trying to govern or rule? And so the British Kingdom or United Kingdom was very based in blood relations. So they respected blood relations, and like the kings and queens of the country, they had this bloodline, and so that meant you were favored by God or something like that. And so she could more easily rule her people because they had this natural inclination to respect her and follow her rulings.
Yeah, I think that. Go ahead, Tim.
No, I think that's right. Although I don't think she was royalty. I don't think she was part of that class. I think she actually rose from the middle class of Britain. So she didn't have that automatic respect.
Okay. I just think you had the most amazing insight about the psychology right at the beginning of the show. I'm still thinking about that. Basically, what femininity is can change when you have children. And that's a lot of what we're, there's this, Rand says at one point in the essay, it means that a properly feminine woman does not treat men as if she were their pal, sister, mother, or leader. It's just like, my wife and I are pals. I still see her as feminine. One person's sister and mother, can still be another person's lover.
It also raises the question of what is what's improperly feminine, because feminine is just feminine. You're either feminine or you're not feminine. There's no like proper femininity or improper femininity. So I don't, some of her terminology in this essay is questionable to me. I don't know what she means. So
I think it goes back to people wanting her, she wanted people to be into the same thing she was into, like, be it smoking or Rachmaninoff. And, in that same set, or she wanted everyone to have the same view of what femininity was. She calls it metaphysical.
I think her whole argument boils down to her concept of femininity. So I think it's right to focus on it. And I do think that, you can have certain aspects of femininity and then you can lack certain aspects. Like someone might be motherly and someone is not. Someone's not interested in being a mother. They're more interested in being an intellectual or doesn't want to devote time to family. And that's fine. But the intellectual is still feminine in certain ways. Like they might like be
But
into guys.
these are all exceptions. I mean, if you're looking at the essence of man and the essence of woman, you said it yourself. The essence of man is the protector. The essence of woman is the mother, basically. So, of course, there are outliers. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Well,
I mean,
I would
and Rand never had children, and a lot of times she doesn't. I mean, certainly in her work, you never see a lot of emphasis on the importance of family and children. And I don't just mean children as family, I mean extended family, because once you have kids, you really start to value your extended family, even the ones that you kind of like were annoyed by in your 20s when you were in a hardcore objectivist. It's like you come to realize that blood is there for you in a way that friends are not, and they're for your children. And so that becomes really important to you, and you begin to cultivate those relationships, I think, and understand their value and their value in society, for a healthy society.
Right.
So I think that she's in a lot of, she's kind of missing that in her, in all of her work, because she's not a parent. And it's not a criticism. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
I had these experiences and this growth after I had a baby, that just really were transformational.
And she didn't, she moved from her extended family. And more, I think this even colors things like her view of seeing, an unwanted child as lifelong slavery.
Yes. Her view on abortion is kind of harsh. It's like her view on motherhood is it's a burden and like this death sentence.
Yeah.
It's very, very strange.
And
And
it reflects more her view that she didn't want to have kids.
right, which is fine. I mean, I don't look down on her for making that choice, but she definitely seems to not value children.
Right.
I mean, at all. So, um,
Did she
that's a personal choice, but she can't, and we can't then extrapolate from that and go, that's the nature of woman, is to be this hero worshiper. Although I have to say that even after children, I maybe even more so since I had a child, I value my family so much more. I value my husband, like the role that he plays in our family. And it's even enhanced that part of my experience as a woman, that hero worship part.
I think that's because you're a feminine woman, and so you relate to her view of, men and women's role towards men. But there are also masculine women. And the title of her essay was about a woman president. And she boils it down to femininity, which I think is a mistake, put it bluntly, because she's trying to deal with women in general as president, and then she talks about feminine women and says that, and bases her whole argument on this theory of femininity, when there are also lesbians, homosexuals who aren't really into worshiping men. So you have to take into consideration all women if you're going to talk about a woman president. But I do want to quote her again on this issue of hero worship, because I think it points out what might be the fundamental error she's making. And she says, quote, her worship, a woman's worship, is an abstract emotion for the metaphysical concept of masculinity as such. So I don't know what an abstract emotion is. I think that's a mistake there. What is an abstract emotion? An emotion is just, what you're feeling. It's
Yeah.
it's a sensation you have. There's no abstraction there. So she's appealing to something abstract and saying that's what you worship. And, that's part of the worship. So, and she's also talking about a metaphysical concept of masculinity. So she's just, in essence, she's saying that a woman worships a concept of masculinity. But she's talking about hero worship. A hero is a full-blown person, a man. So, real men are not concepts. So this whole idea, I think, is confused. And I don't think it might be conflated with some form of idealism where you worship the idea or the concept and you're not really dealing with the objective reality.
It's the
So,
romantic part of romantic realism.
yeah, but I think it's misplaced in this argument,
Sure.
about a woman president. I don't think it fits.
It's, I mean, we kind of understand what she's getting at, and I just think it's as much of the culture she grew up in, and it's why even people like Harry and Binswanger and James Valiant were kind of, trying to say where they disagreed with the essay. So I just think that it in a lot of cases we're bringing up issues where we understand what she's saying about generalizations, and it just, even so, in a sense, we're quibbling over whether it's zero or, a couple of percent.
When you say that it comes from her culture that she grew up with, what exactly do you mean?
Male chauvinist culture.
Russian culture,
Yeah.
Russian
I mean,
culture, and even early American
mhm.
culture from 100 years ago.
Okay.
Early 20th century.
Pre-feminist culture in America, but as a post-feminist female, I hate feminism, and just to correct you a little bit on the whole, like, but you're a feminine woman. I was raised in that culture where I should self-actualize as a career person. I have been a high-level management consultant. I have been a business owner. I didn't have children till late. I wasn't sure I even wanted them. I had that idea that they would ruin my life, that every woman is brainwashed with today. And I have a high IQ. I'm smart. I managed people. I could have gone the route of politics instead of business, and I could have tried to be president, I guess. I probably would have done an adequate job of it, but I found in business, I had this kind of epiphany in my late 20s that I couldn't really be myself. And it was really eating away at me. And so I kind of quit the job I had, and I started being myself. I got a new job, and I wore dresses, and I was cute, and I was friendly because that's who I am. I'm this friendly extrovert. Um, and I was working in a finance department, and I have never come so close to being fired. And it wasn't
Well,
because I wasn't capable of the job. It just being friendly, and people did not like that I was friendly with people outside of the department. Um, I had to be objective, and objective meant no friends and no, I don't know, enthusiastic personality. Like I was not appreciated. And it was the feminine sides of me is what I let loose. Because I was always opinionated and outspoken and whatever, but I was wearing dark suits. I had my hair, smoothed and professional. I wasn't friendly. I was more stoic. And that's what people
spirits and
wanted from
opinions
me.
is just too much.
That's what people wanted from me in business. So it's and maybe it's better today, I don't know, but I mean it was still kind of like that. It was like, if you want to succeed as a woman in business, you either need to masculinize yourself or start your own business and be kind of immune to the friction that you're going to create around you. And that's what I mean by the friction. Like, it becomes a problem that you are constantly dealing with. The lack of respect, the lack of credibility that you seem to have. You
Is,
have
is that
to.
is that not playing a role in some of the women that you were describing before as being
That's what I'm
more
saying.
just
They
mean?
changed. They changed because that's what worked. And I don't think it made them happy. I mean, at least, like you said, you can only say what your own psychology is, but it made me miserable. And I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to pretend to be somebody I'm not. I'm not this, I don't know. I'm not this buttoned up cold bitch, you know? And
Mhm.
it harmed my career. But it's not that I couldn't succeed. I could succeed, but I had a lot more to deal with. It wasn't just the job anymore. Now I had to deal with this weird societal thing that was pressing down on me, that I'd never experienced before. So I'm just saying, like, I think there are women out there who who care less about that sort of thing. I mean, it's not just they're masculine. You can be a feminine woman who rises to the top, doesn't give a crap about the friction going on around them, is like one of those personalities that's just kind of immune to that. Um, and actually, I think that's what it takes in the male version of a president as well. I mean, look at Trump, and I don't know how he's not curled up in a fetal position somewhere. And he's not. He just has a personality that the friction he's creating does not get him down.
Yeah. He he takes it in his energy. I mean, well, I remember in 2016, one of the things he praised Hillary for at the debate was that her tenacity, that she keeps coming back. And obviously that's something he values and he sees in himself as well. But whether or not he meant it about Hillary, he she was almost our first woman president. And I guess I mean, everyone sees her as vindictive and a power luster.
Look at her. She's miserable and nasty, you know?
Yeah.
Well, Sunny, I think you were describing a particular personality trait that applies to both men and women, and
Yes.
like authenticity. Authenticity is a big thing now. You hear it a lot if you listen to podcasts and stuff. Um, so I think if you value authenticity, then you're less likely to conform to something you don't agree with. And that's kind of what Trump does. You recognize a certain level of authenticity in him, even though he makes mistakes and he says a bunch of junk. He's always trying to just speak his mind, and it kind of gets through to you that he's trying to be real. He's trying to do the right thing and that what he considers to be the right thing and to just be himself in front of us. And you get the opposite sense from Kamala. She's always trying to fool you, cackle her way into your heart. It's just it's an obvious fraud, and that's why she can't just speak her mind off the cuff because she sounds like an idiot.
She gets in trouble when she does that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're entering an era where truth is the value. And I mean, Rand said that reason is the ultimate virtue and honesty. And it's like we're living in it's that postmodern nightmare where everything's a lie and everything's fake and you can't trust anything, and and, and nobody cares about reality. They just care about how it looks. And then you got Trump, who comes in and throws kind of a boulder into that. And I'm not saying he's not spinning, because he's a marketing person, but you're right. He comes across as real. I like the people around him that come across as real too, even if they're a little rougher around the edges. I prefer that right now.
Absolutely. And that's part of the hate of Trump, that he kind of exposed these moderate Republicans that weren't really fighting and weren't really willing to take the slings and arrows. And they hate him for that as much as for whatever it is they claim is their problem with him.
Because a lot of them were just playing the game, they're just saying what corporations are telling them to say. And they're led by the deep state. And then
Mhm.
Trump comes in and he's kind of the opposite. He might bullshit you, but he's bullshitting you for himself. He's not,
It's
he's not
refreshing.
trying to, yeah.
And
I mean,
he does have a fundamental appreciation for America. He does. He's got that old school, he likes
Absolutely.
America. He's not a nihilist.
So he's closer to age than Rand. Some of those old time values.
But
But
I could see a woman who retained her femininity, but is honest and true and kind of oblivious to, just has as a personality, is oblivious to all the slings and arrows that are going to come at her. And I could see a person like that doing that job. But then the question is, I think, because it would cause so much friction, and especially in dealing with foreign leaders, is it dangerous? Would it be dangerous to have a female president?
yeah, and again, I still think it depends on the woman itself. People were going to mess less with a Thatcher than they would with a Kamala.
well, let's not forget that a female president. So one of the duties of the president is to, form treaties along with Congress, with other nations. So in dealing with foreign heads of state, she'll have advisors, she'll have people around her helping her. It's not like the president has to deal with these people alone. So I don't see a huge problem there.
You say that, but at the same time, then why does it make such a difference when Trump is in office versus Biden? If all that matters is the people around them, there's that story that was circulating recently about Trump. He's in a meeting with the Taliban leader and he says, if one soldier dies, I know where you live. And then he says, show him the picture of his house. So the aide pulls out the picture of his house and then he just walks out of the room. So there, you know, stuff with the North Korean dictator. Some of that is important. Can you imagine? I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't be done. I think like Tulsi Gabbard, I could see her meeting with people and being tough and um
Yeah,
Well,
I
it's
could
just
definitely
it's a
see
little
her
rare,
personality.
and it's not Harris.
there's more than one way to skin a cat. You don't have to call him Rocket Boy. You could draft some letter that's going to convey the same message to him, and
Yeah, that's true.
without that language. So it's not necessarily, um, you know, just there being a male there or versus a female. It's like, who are your advisors? Biden has pathetic bad advisors and does the wrong job or does the wrong thing. Trump is more likely to pick capable people and get better advice and do the right thing. Not that he's going to always do the right thing, but you kind of, just because of who Biden is, he's going to pick the wrong people.
When there
And
was
Trump,
probably some deal to retain a bunch of Biden people in exchange for them all, coalescing around Harris.
and since he's a puppet, who's to say he's even picking these people? He's probably got, you know, very influential donors who are telling him who to put in place.
Right. Well, I think we've had an amazing conversation. Sunny, maybe we'll have you back after the election if you're up for a little post-election analysis.
Sure. What's your prediction?
God, I mean, I see the polls starting to turn to Trump, but I saw what happened in 2022 as well when they were saying the GOP was going to take both chambers of Congress. So I'm cautiously I mean, I'm a little pessimistic. I suspect they're gonna, they're gonna do the same mail-in operation, and it'll be Kamala and a squeaker.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably right. I I think they have ways of cheating that we don't even know about yet.
Yeah,
We're always 5 steps behind.
yeah, exactly. I agree. In some ways, it's like the global alignment has already happened. Is just some of the way I mean, we keep in touch with all these leaders, and everything's coordinated. Even these Iranian strikes against Israel. It's like, but I'll save that conspiracy for another day.
I'm very positive. I think the country is going to wise up and Kamala will get blown away in a landslide and Trump will become victorious and he'll become our king. And for the rest of his life, he'll just rule like a king over the kingdom of America.
That positive? I
Yes.
mean, I think he's planning to step down after 4 years.
No, he will live forever. They will discover the medicine that keeps you alive, and he will never go away.
I guess they'll amend the Constitution. What the heck?
And then we're gonna have a fight over the throne from the three brothers, and the younger
Yes.
brother Baron will be victorious after slaying Don Jr. and Eric Jr. will lose in some, so he'll die in some other way, like from some battle somewhere.
All right,
Yes.
great. Very
It's a Shakespeare play.
That's great. Well, Sunny, it's been great having you on. William, any other final thoughts?
No, I think I pretty much said it all there.
Good.
Long
Well,
live.
What's our sum up? Do we have a sum up?
this is it's pretty much
Are we
happening
for
as
or against a female president? I don't even know.
I mean, I think we're kind of it's somewhere in the, you were saying 0 to 5% range.
Yeah, perhaps.
Definitely
Okay.
against the current female who's running for president.
Yes.
Right. That there's consensus
But
on.
not because she's a female.
No, not because she's a female. Her politics disqualify her.
Because she's terrible.
Yeah.
But we can say for sure Ayn Rand would not vote for Kamala Harris.
For sure.
The end.
Great. So I'm Scott Schiff along with William Swig. This is the Ayn Rand Fan Club, and we will see you next time.